Hey guys, it's JCHD, and today I'm going to be bringing an update to a video I done about a year ago where I compared three controllers for fighting games, and that's the Hitbox, the stick, and a pad. In that video I made the mistake of not trying all of the controllers for a certain period of time. At the time I strictly only played with a pad, gotten decent with a pad, execution wise, and then decided to try a Hitbox and a stick, but didn't get good with them before making the video at all. And in the video it shows that. And as a result, my opinion was I would prefer to play with a pad because that's what I was most comfortable with at the time, and my execution was best with that at the time. So now I've had a year's worth of experience with all controllers, and my opinion has changed. I thought I'd just do a little update to go into more detail on the pros and cons of each controller, and then say which controller I prefer and why. And I have a few things to say at the end as well, so make sure you stick around for that. Okay, so we're going to start off with the pros with the pad. The pad is the most common controller used for fighting games, as it is, it's what comes with the PS3 or comes with whatever console you're using for a fighting game. By far the cheapest option. Because to buy a new controller would be something like £40, £30, especially for like PS3. It's probably £30 now. Or if you're buying a DualShock 4, say you want to play Tekken 7 when it comes out, it'd be like £50 for a new DualShock 4. Whereas a stick or a Hitbox would be closer to £200, especially for a good one. Obviously you can get like a decent stick for between £70 and £120. So yeah, there's the cost is a massive pro for the pad. By far the cheapest option. It has silent buttons. This is more for, like, say you're playing next to somebody offline. Apparently if you're godlike at a game, you can listen to the other guy's buttons and determine what he's going to do next based off of that. So if you have a pad with silent buttons, he's not going to be able to hear that. And the other pro is movement is quite easy to learn compared to the other controllers, because the only thing you have to do on both sides, back, quarter circle back, and then repeat, or back, quarter circle back, and then repeat. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, there we go. And it's very easy. So they're the pros of the pad. Not many, but they're pros. So now we'll move on to the cons. The cons of the pad are, because the buttons are so, like, the directional buttons are so close together, sometimes you can press a button that you didn't mean to press. So say, like, if I just wanted to press down, I may accidentally press down forward because my thumb was slightly too close to the forward button, and I might get a down forward 4 instead of a down 4. A better example would be, say, for electrics, it's very difficult to time the down forward with 2. So if I do forward, neutral, down, down forward and 2, electric will come out like that. But especially when you're first starting to learn electrics, it can be more like this, or this. But obviously if you're experienced, you can get it pretty much every time. Another con is if you're strictly a pad player and you want to play in an arcade, you're going to struggle, because arcade sticks, in an arcade you can only play on an arcade stick if you're playing on an arcade cabinet. So if you're a pad player, you're going to struggle, and you're not going to be used to the movement and stuff. It's difficult to accurately press multiple buttons, so say like 1 plus 2, 2 plus 4, 1 plus 3 and 3 plus 4 can generally be quite difficult, and that's just because the buttons are small and sometimes unresponsive. Oh yeah, that's the other thing, sometimes the D-pad can be unresponsive. So say if I want to sidestep, sometimes I'll get a jump because it didn't register me releasing the button. For movement, especially in Tekken where you're moving constantly, and doing all these difficult movement techniques, it relies on your thumb a lot, and it can get very, very tiring, and some people will injure their thumbs because they play for too long and then they have to end up switching to a different controller because they've injured their thumb so badly. And the last con, it's not suitable for people with stubby thumbs, so you might end up pressing buttons that you didn't want to press. So that's the pad. Now I'm gonna move on to the Japanese arcade stick. So now we have the Japanese arcade stick with the Sanwa JLF stick with a square gate. The pros for Japanese arcade stick are that the buttons are laid out ergonomically, so they fit nicely with your hands, and the buttons are super responsive. Inputs are more accurate than a pad because with an arcade stick you're not going to accidentally press a different direction at the same time as pressing another direction, because you can physically only press one direction at a time. So if I press forward, I'm going to get forward. If I press down, I'm going to get down. Unless, like, for some reason the stick just slips into down forward because I'm pressing too hard in that direction. Specifically for Tekken, player 1 backdash is insanely good, because you can use index or middle finger to do the quarter circle and your thumb to press back. So you're working in sync with two different fingers, and it just makes for a much faster backdash. And it's the same for the sway method as well. Because of the more accurate inputs with the stick, electrics suddenly become a lot easier. Another pro is that sticks are very easily moddable, so you can adjust the, say, like if a button breaks or the stick for some reason becomes stiff, or I don't know, something inside the stick breaks because you've been using it too much, you can easily replace the buttons, you can easily replace the stick. Now, as for cons, cost is a massive con for a stick. They can be anywhere from, to get a good stick that is, anywhere from, what was it earlier, I said £70 to £120 for a decent stick, and then to get a really good stick, it's like this TE2. It's £180, but to get a stick like this is to get all the extra gimmicky stuff like a turbo button and easy access to the inside of the case, and like dual modded for PS4 and PS3. That's pretty much it, actually. Oh, and a detachable cable and a carrying handle for like straps and stuff. Whereas like a stick that costs £70 to £120 won't have those features. They will just have a really good parts like Sanwa buttons and a Sanwa stick, and that's it. Right, so game specific stuff now. A con for a Japanese arcade stick is the wave dash on the player 1 side becomes incredibly difficult because it's a very unnatural motion for your wrist, and unlike the player 2 side wave dash, you solely have to rely on your wrist to do the forward motion and the quarter circle forward. Whereas on the other side, you can use your thumb and index or middle finger, or both, to do the back and then the quarter circle. So it takes a lot more practice to get used to, and just feels very unnatural. But that doesn't affect your backdash too much because you can just use the sway method, which is very easy to get used to. Another con is, unlike the pad, the buttons are very loud. Like, I'm just tapping it. I'm not even tapping it very hard, and you can probably hear me pressing it. And most of the time, arcade stick players really smack the buttons, especially the old school players, because they're used to stiffer buttons. So when you're playing, earlier, like I said, when you're playing side to side, people listen out for your button presses to determine what you're going to do next. you know, it's really obvious when you're playing on a stick. So I'm going to quickly just change over to the Korean arcade stick. Okay, so now I have switched over to the Korean stick. As you can probably tell, I'm using the same Mad Catz T2, but I've switched the lever out for a Crown CW something or other, the one that fits in Japanese arcade sticks. This is a Korean lever. It doesn't have a gate, it's a complete circular motion instead of a square. And it has a rubber grommet inside, so the tension is a lot. There's a lot more tension on the stick compared to a Japanese stick where there's pretty much no tension at all. Now this actually fixes one of the cons of the Japanese stick, in that player 1 wave dash suddenly becomes easier because the stick forces your hand back to neutral. So it makes it easier to transition from forward to the quarter circle forward to forward again, making wave dashing a lot easier. And that's pretty much all there is to it, actually. All the pros are pretty much the same other than that one thing. And it helps speed up your backdash. And your player 2 wave dash. And your player 2 backdash as well. So yeah, Korean sticks, fantastic for Tekken. Absolutely amazing. The only cons I can think of are that it are obviously all the same as the Japanese stick except for the wave dash and faster movement. The other cons are the corners at first are difficult to hit because of the tension of the stick, which also makes up forward and up back unnecessarily difficult. But after a little while you get used to it. The other con is that Korean sticks are much harder to get hold of than Japanese sticks. There's only one manufacturer that makes good Korean sticks, and that's Itoki, and they are sold out 99% of the time. So the other option you're left with is to get a Japanese stick and mod it to be a Korean lever, which is probably a cheaper option as well, because the Itoki Omni sticks are hella expensive and they're not even PS4 compatible. So when Tekken 7 comes out, you won't be able to use your Itoki Omni on Tekken 7. Basically, it just fixes one of the cons of the Japanese stick and makes everything else a little bit faster as well. So yeah, now I'm going to move over to the Hitbox. Okay, so now I'm going over to the Hitbox. This is basically an arcade stick replaced with 4 directional buttons instead of having a lever. The pros of the Hitbox are that it's very easy to pick up and use in terms of difficult execution. It has many shortcuts to get around the difficult execution barriers that all the other controllers have. Okay, and much like the pad, it has soft buttons, not as soft, but softer than a arcade stick, so people can't listen to your inputs. Now the cons of the Hitbox are all on the player 2 side, because the forward button is now on this side of the Hitbox. You can no longer use your right index finger to help with the movement, so it all relies on your left ring finger, which is never ever used in fighting games ever until you start using a Hitbox. So that becomes very awkward and difficult, and it takes a long time to get used to as well. Much like Korean sticks, a Hitbox is extremely difficult to get hold of, because as soon as they go in stock they're sold out. So yeah, Hitboxes is difficult to get a hold of, especially if you're in the UK as well, because you have to pay a massive shipping price, which then makes the cost of a Hitbox very high. Oh yeah, another con is because you're constantly switching your right hand from directions to action buttons, you sometimes lose where your right hand is on the stick. It may sound stupid and retarded, but it's true. And and you often press buttons that you don't want to press. So yeah, now I'm going to move on to what I think about all the different controllers. The controller that I prefer to use now for Tekken, actually for all fighting games, is the Korean stick. In my last video I said I preferred the pad, but that was because at the time I was only used to a pad and I wasn't used to anything else. Whereas now, I've messed around with all the sticks, I've gotten all the controllers, and I've not mastered the movement, execution on all of them, but I've gotten competent with them all. And I can definitely say that the Korean stick is the best out of all of them. One, because everything execution wise is easier, and the cons, basically the pros far outweigh the cons, whereas on every other controller the cons interrupt your progress massively. Whereas if you're using a Korean stick, the only cons are jumping, which can easily get used to, and the other con is because of the tension of the stick, your wrist gets tired a lot. But if that tension goes away after a week or two, and you can start to use it for longer sessions again, without hindering your execution progress. So yeah, in my opinion, Korean sticks are fantastic and everybody should be using them. But then there's the matter of personal preference. So now my personal preference is a Korean stick, and I switched from a pad to a Korean stick because of that. But for some people, a pad, the cons on a pad doesn't matter to them. They can get around them. Or the cons on a Japanese stick, they can get around them. Like, say, for the main man, for example, he uses a Japanese stick, and he has a very, very quick player 1 wave dash. Really surprising, because player 1 wave dash is one of the cons on a Japanese stick. So yeah, so obviously it comes down to personal preference, but I will say experiment with all the types of controllers out there, because you never know, the one that you've been using for a long time may not be the best one for you, and something else might be, and you just don't know it yet. I also wanted to talk about 2D games as well, because 2D games have a different execution inputs compared to Tekken, which is heavily movement based. For 2D games, things like double quarter circle forward or double quarter circle back, charge moves, 360s, all play a big role in 2D games. And even though Korean sticks, say for jumping, aren't as good, they're still really good. Like, double quarter circle forward on a Japanese stick is just as difficult as a player 1 wave dash in Tekken. The Korean stick fixes that with the return to neutral. So Korean sticks in 2D games are still just as good as they are in 3D games. Okay, so now I actually need to talk about the importance of execution in fighting games over character knowledge, making reads, and coming up with tech to counter something. Execution is by far the least important thing that you should be concerned about, and everything else needs to come first. So if you're worried about your execution being bad, don't. It's bad for you, because take me for example, I'm still as good as what I was a year ago, despite my execution being a lot better, because I'm using a better controller. But I'm still just as bad at the game. I still lose the same shit that I was losing to a year ago, because I wasn't learning matchups, I wasn't learning how to beat certain things, or I just wasn't getting better at the game. Now my focus is going to be getting better at games. getting better at reading opponents and getting character knowledge and all that stuff, over being concerned about execution. And I strongly recommend that everybody else does the same thing. Forget about execution, that comes with time. What you should be more concerned about is character knowledge and making reads and stuff like that. And I actually have quite a few pieces of material to help you with those things. All the links will be in the description below. There is a book called Playing to Win, where it talks about the sort of mindset you should have when you're playing fighting games, and the mindset you should have to help you improve. Level Up Your Game, which is Rip's YouTube channel. He has a lot of character-based tutorials on his channel. Avoiding the Puddle, Eris's channel, he has a lot of tutorials on his channel as well. For 2D games, you can go to Cross Counter TV, which is Gutex and Mike Ross. Well, it's just their YouTube channel. They have a lot of tutorials on there. Gutex has published 2 books. One is Fighting Game Fundamentals and Preparing for Street Fighter 5 or something like that. And you can also use the Footsie's Handbook from SonicHurricane.com, which is a fantastic tool for 2D fighters. And that is my update to Hitbox versus Pad versus Stick. Thank you for watching, and peace.